Ken Stowe asks, if you could switch out one Walt Disney World ride for a Disneyland ride, which one would you switch? I don't need any Disneyland rides. You can keep them all. Just give me Paint the Night, please. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Disney Q&A, the series in which you guys send me all sorts of Disney questions, whether they're about the history or the parks or the movies, and I try to give you answers to the best of my ability. As we kick off every episode, I would like to first point out a couple of answers from last week's question of the week, which is, if you were to bring back the Osborne lights to Disney World property, but not put them in Hollywood Studios, where would you put them? The first answer actually came from two different people. You have Ashley Marie, who says, I think Disney Springs would be a nice place to put them. Personally, I just can't see them in any other park other than Hollywood Studios. And you have Memetists, who says, I think they would look really nice in downtown Disney's new town center area. I picked those two. I think that's a really cool place to put it. I think that would draw a lot of attraction to Disney Springs, which, you know, not to say it needs it, but I think, you know, that's a good way to bring more traffic to the area. And then the second answer that I thought was really cool came from Arctic Elephant, who said, I would put the Osborne lights around the Polynesian resort because Christmas in Hawaii, yeah. I think that's a cool answer too. I think it would just be different. And oddly, as I'm getting older, I'm enjoying the idea of the Polynesian more and more. So I would definitely like to see them there if they were ever to come back. So with that out of the way, let's jump right into some of these questions. Our first question is an opinion question. It comes from Theme Park Planet, and Theme Park Planet asks, what would you like to see replace the Tower of Terror in Florida if it had to be replaced by something other than a Marvel property? Boy, you're really poking the lion by asking what to replace Tower of Terror with in Florida. Obviously, a lot of people would not like the idea of replacing Tower of Terror in Florida, but if you're going to make me... I mean, I used to do a series called Revisiting Disney, where I actually played this game with every ride, where I thought, if I had to replace every ride, what would I replace it with? And originally, I had the concept of replacing it with sort of like an interactive theater, like Sleep No More. But if we're going to keep it as a ride, and we're going to keep that sort of elevator drop mechanic, I think I would take out the Twilight Zone theme, and I think I would make it a sci-fi ride. Now, I know what you're thinking, Guardians of the Galaxy, you're already getting sci-fi, but not that sort of sci-fi. Because when you think of Hollywood Studios, you're thinking of, like, the golden age of Hollywood. You're thinking about the 20s and 30s. And while this is another decade or two later, you know, when I think of old Hollywood, I think of the sci-fi B movies of the 40s and the 50s. And so I think it would be really cool if they ever had to replace Tower of Terror to put some sort of original story, some 1950s sci-fi, like really cheesy and hokey, and maybe rather than an elevator dropping, you're in like a spaceship that's launching off and falling or something like that because of some giant alien monster. You know, something weird like that, but something that still sort of draws upon that idea of the golden age of Hollywood. I think that would be a lot of fun. And that's the question I'm going to throw out this week for all of you. I know a lot of you are going to say nothing. Don't replace Tower of Terror ever. I love the Tower of Terror. Keep it Twilight Zone. But if you had to replace the Tower of Terror with something besides a Marvel property, what would you replace it with? You can leave your answer in the comments below, or you can tweet them at me. I'm at RobPlays, and I'll pick my favorite two, and I'll feature them in the next Q&A. On to our next question, which comes from That One Guy Cast. And That One Guy Cast asks, on the topic of World Showcase, I've heard something about a log flume ride that was going to go in Canada. What's the story with that? So originally, I kind of had heard things about that, but I never really looked into it, and so I did a little digging, and I wasn't able to find any concrete story when it comes to a log flume in Canada. It was apparently a rumor going around that they were looking to install one, and it never happened. Now, I don't know how legitimate that rumor is. What I do know is the idea of having more rides in World Showcase was originally planned when Epcot was being built. In fact, the one that I do know about that never came to fruition was there was going to be a roller coaster in the Japanese pavilion, and it was going to be based on Mount Fuji. It was going to be almost like an Expedition Everest sort of roller coaster through the mountain. And the idea is it was going to be sponsored by Fujifilm. And the problem there ended up being that Kodak, their competitor, Kodak Film, was sponsoring the Imagination Pavilion. Things sort of fell through. In general, World Showcase ended up being sort of half of what it was supposed to be because Disney had a lot of trouble securing sponsorships for the different pavilions. You see, Back then, they would often go to companies for sponsorships. They would do long 10-year deals where they would partially be paying for the upkeep and the R&D for these attractions. And Disney's idea was to go to the countries themselves. The problem there is governments change. You know, you get new people elected, you've got people leaving, you've got budgets that change. And so getting a country's government to commit to a decade or longer of sponsoring an attraction in another country turned out to be really difficult. So Disney had to go to different companies within those countries. And in short, running out of time, they ended up not opening as many country pavilions as they wanted. And a lot of them didn't have the attractions that they wanted. So that log flume idea could have some water to it, pun intended, but I don't really know specifically. Switching back to an opinion question, our next question comes from Maybe Babies, and Maybe Babies, that's a really fun name, asks, are you one day going to move to Orlando, or would you like to, because you seem like you would love being close to Disney World? Great question, one I get every once in a while. At the moment, I have no plans to move down to Florida to be closer to Disney. There is a certain part of back of my mind that thinks about it every so often. It would be easier to do vlogs, go to the parks. But I am, you know, a born and raised New Yorker. I'm still here in New York. I have a job I enjoy here. So there's sort of a lot that would go into moving. You know, I've told myself if I were to ever move down there, the only reason I would is if I were to ever take a shot at doing YouTube full time. The channel's not that large. I am a very long way from ever realizing that dream of doing YouTube full time. So I guess I'm not really planning to move down there anytime soon, but it would kind of be nice. Yeah. Part of me would worry about the idea of losing the magic a bit going so often. I think part of what keeps me loving these parks so much is that I only get to go there. You know, it used to be every couple of years. Now it's every couple of months. So there's a little bit of fear there, but you know, who knows? Who knows what the future holds? Our next question comes from Marco Duchetta, and Marco asks, I'm from California, and my dad was talking about how crowded Disneyland can get due to the overselling of annual passes. Is there a limit of sold passes per year? And if not, do you think there should be? So I did a little bit of digging into this. I tried to find an answer. I could find no solid answer as to whether or not there is a personal limit. So if there is, it seems like it's never been met. I would imagine they sort of have their own internal limit where it no longer becomes fiscally to their benefit to sell annual passes. But considering the price of annual passes, you know, we're talking about passes that are $600-800 or more. They probably don't get close to that limit. There is an element of balancing the crowds at the parks. Yeah, I don't think the answer would be in limiting how many annual passes you sell. California, I'd imagine, has a lot more annual pass holders than Florida because it's just more of a denser area. So you've got more regulars who could just, you know, hop on over with a 5-minute drive. That said, I think you see other elements, and we're going to actually talk about a question later in the episode that seems to be their way of trying to control crowds. But, you know, I think they do crowd control through some, you know, means that we might like and some that we don't like. The ones we don't like, you know, come in the form of raising the price of tickets or adding blackout dates to certain passes. The ones that we might like are just, you know, things like when they redid the hub in the Magic Kingdom. I think a large part of that was to improve crowd flow. So even though it was crowded, you know, it doesn't feel as crowded because people are moving more smoothly. Or things like Fast Pass Plus, you know, was certainly the very first Fast Pass, and now this new iteration of Fast Pass are answers to how to deal with crowds so that the lines don't get too crazy. I don't think the answer is just limiting passes because, you know, that's just not as fair, right? I feel like everybody should have the opportunity to go. I don't know if just limiting how many people, you know, if you look at things like dining, I think where it's inherently limited because you have only so many tables that you can serve, you see what happens there where people are waking up at like 6 a.m. to book their, you know, dining reservations because they go so quickly. I would hate to see that happen with like, you know, annual passes as well. Our next question comes from Katie Cat 2003, and Katie Cat asks, if you could build an attraction for a newer CGI Disney movie, Tangled, Big Hero 6, Zootopia, etc., which movie would you pick and what kind of ride would it be? Now, I've thought about things like, you know, I just mentioned earlier that they wanted to originally put a Mount Fuji roller coaster in the Japan pavilion. Why not build like a Big Hero 6 roller coaster in the Japan pavilion. Obviously, that movie doesn't take place in Japan or San Francisco. It takes place in this sort of fictional world of San Fran, Tokyo, which is sort of like a mashup of the two. But I think, sort of in the same style of Frozen, where Frozen Ever After doesn't actually take place in Norway, but it sort of fits in Norway. I think that would be really cool for Japan. I think it would balance it out. I think it would definitely add some more thrill rides to Epcot. I think that'd be a lot of fun. But I liked Big Hero 6, so, I don't know. I feel like if we were to do something on Tangled, Fantasyland, I think, has more than enough. They just got the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. What were the other suggestions here? Zootopia. People have suggested that'd be a really cool way to retheme Splash Mountain, work in some sort of Zootopia thing. But I would personally want to see Big Hero 6 in Japan. I think that'd be a lot of fun. And our final question this week comes from Dark Hockey. And Dark Hockey asks, did you hear that Disney wants to adjust annual passes so that annual pass holders can't go to the parks when Star Wars and Toy Story Lands open? What are your thoughts? So the rumor that was going around, and it was based on a survey that Disney was putting out, was that Disney was going to adjust the annual passes over in Florida, possibly in California too, so that certain tiers of annual passes would not work within a certain window after these new lands open. So it's not a blanket thing where no annual pass holders would be able to go to these places. And there weren't really details as to whether or not the blackout would apply to all the parks, or just the park with the land in it, or just the land itself. Although I can't imagine how they would even enforce that part. But I think the idea was they are testing the waters to see if people are willing to pay a premium to get to these new lands. And it obviously sounds like they're trying to think of different ways to alleviate crowds, because clearly when Star Wars Land opens, it's going to be a madhouse. I can't think of the last Disney attraction that has the popularity and the just the hype that something like a Star Wars Land would have. And it would definitely be something Disney would have to look into. So it sounds like they were testing the waters. There's no official news. You got to remember, Disney can do what they want. If they wanted to do this, they just do it. There's nothing stopping them. What you should take away from these surveys are they just want to feel it out. A lot of people sort of attack Disney for not thinking things through when they do things like the Guardians of the Galaxy Tower of Terror or changes here and there, but this is them thinking about that. They're going to take these responses and they're going to factor that into it and see. Maybe nobody's willing to pay extra to get into them. Maybe, they do the math of how many people they think are going to get there, and maybe blocking them out with blackout dates isn't going to make a big enough difference. I mean, we'll have to see. I mean, I hope they don't do it. I really like that Disney eventually shifted from this concept of using ticket books where you had to worry about like what rides you were going on and what rides you weren't going on. And then they shifted to this one ticket that put you in the park and let you ride anything. And I think bringing in all these various levels of annual passes or passes with Park Hopper just sort of muddies the waters a bit and brings it back to that older system where, what you can do and how much fun you can have on a Disney trip is determined by how much money you have. So I'm hoping that they don't do that, but time will tell. These areas of the parks are years away, so we're probably not going to hear anything for a while. And when we do, we'll definitely make a video and talk about it. Anyway, there you have it. Some fantastic questions this week. Again, the question of the week this week is, if you had to replace the Tower of Terror in Florida with something that isn't Marvel related, what would you replace it with? Leave those answers in the comments below. If you have a question that you would like for me to answer in a future Q&A, you could also leave that in the comments below, or you could tweet me. I'm at RobPlays. If you want more Disney content, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button. I do 3 Disney videos a week. If you want even more Disney content, I do a Disney weekly podcast with my friend Christine. It's called the Tomorrowland Transit Authorities. You can find it on iTunes or Google Play, or on our website, ttapodcast.com. I want to thank you all for watching. Whatever you're doing, make the most of it, because it makes it that much better. And I'll see you next time for the next Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody. Last time I asked what attraction should I revisit next, and the answer I got was the Tower of Terror. Now, this is a tough one because I'd say it's a pretty untouchable attraction. This is a very beloved attraction.